Yeah. So thank you again, guys, for joining us today in the second leg of the APJC Partner Workshop for the SD-WAN. Thank you for taking the time out. Quickly, I'll just run through what are the sessions, the topics which we're going to cover today. Very first, we'll be starting with the on-prem controllers setup and handling certs. Hopefully, we'll wrap this in the predefined time limit of 60 minutes, followed with the migration from iOS XE to XE SD-WAN, that is the autonomous mode to controller mode. We'll break out for like 15 minutes after these two sessions, and the last hour we'll be covering the device onboarding, working with PNP, and the SD-WAN SD branch demo is the bonus session we have for you today. We worked up. Seeing the demands we are seeing in the industry. So without wasting any much time, I'll hand this over to Sushant, who will be covering the session, the first session. So I'll just pause the recording quickly, and Sushant, over to you.
Yeah, so hello everyone, very good morning. So I'd be covering this particular session, that on-prem controller setup and handling the certificates. Yeah, so basically, as we all would be knowing that, we have two methods of deploying the controllers. One is cloud hosted, the another one is on-prem, right? So we still recommend to have the cloud hosted controllers because of, the flexibility and everything which we get it, right? And it would be managed by Cisco. You just need to raise one, the SR, and everything would be deployed, right, by the cloud upstream. But in certain scenarios, for the especially with the financial customers, and not only for the financial customers, other customers as well, they might demand for the on-prem controller because of some security reasons and all, which they might have, or maybe some compliance issues and all, because of which they would need to go ahead with the on-prem controllers, right? So there are different methods of and there are different ways of achieving it, right? On-prem controller deployment, right? There are 3-4 designs are there, right? Different ways how we can do it and all. Depends on how we want the connectivity, which with particular transport. Is it a public only, or is it the private only transport, or is it a mix of both, which we call it as a hybrid environment, right? So we'll just cover that. Before we start with that, some the parameters, right, which we need to consider here. That is TLOC. TLOC, it's as we all know, it is identifier, static identifier for the WAN endpoints, right, which consists of the encapsulation, which could be IPsec, GRE, then color, and then the system IP, right? So that is what consists of the TLOC, right? So in that particular thing, we have the different the colors. One is the private, the another one is the public. So private, we usually use it for the MPLS, the Metro Ethernet, and all those sort of the transport, right, point-to-point links and all those things, right? So we use those private colors. So we have MPLS private 1 to private 6 and Metro Ethernet. These are the 8 colors which we can use, and I think these are the sufficient colors which we can use it for the area environment, right? 8 colors. Then the other colors would be the public transport. You might have the DIA, public internet, right? Any internet circuit, right? For that matter, maybe the 4G and all those things, right? So you would need to use the the public colors for that, and this is the range: default, red, blue, gold, and all those things. Public internet, biz internet. There are multiple the public colors as well. So where to define private and public? It's the highly significant, right? Ideally, if you have the private transport, you can use anything. But when you have the public transport and NAT is enabled, right, on that particular WAN interface, it is highly significant. One should use the public color against the private color. Okay, so that's what the color is significant for. And then the color setting that would be applied for WAN to WAN edge communication, and as well as WAN edge to color controller communication, because in that particular case the controllers would need to learn the netted IP and all those things, right? The private IP as well as the netted IP. So it would help in this particular case, right? Next, as we were talking about the NAT, right? There is a significance of using the public color wherever we, have the NAT configured, especially for the public transport, right? So here is the example. Like, let's say the local color is, the public, and even the controller color is public. Then then it would be using actually the public IP for the communication for the retailers and the TLS channels, right? So it would be using the public IPs because we would be relying on the netted IP for the reachability and everything, right, with the controllers. And we should be knowing the netted IP as well as the private IP, right? In case, let's say, the another transport is with the MPLS, right? So then the another example would be, right, a local color is private and the controller color is public, right? In this particular case as well, we would be relying on the public IP, right, for the communication, and then we would be defining public color itself, right? So you can just remember, like, whether it is remote or local, right? If you are using any at one place, right, the public color, you should be using, the communication would happen over the public IP. Okay, that's how you can remember. But if both the ends are, the private, then, the communication would happen with the private IP, right? So then the different modes or the design for the deploying the on-prem controllers. So the placement of the vBond, vSmart, vManage, as we all know, these are all the VMs which we would be deploying on the UCS, right? Hypervisor with the ESX or KVM or anything, right? Which is supported for this particular deployment, right? So one can have the vBond, vSmart, vManage behind the DMZ firewall, and then define public IP directly on the controllers. Okay, so there are two ways. One can have public IP, defined directly on the controllers, or due to some restrictions or compliance issues or security issues, could be anything. Okay, we can't use the public IPs on the controllers, and we would have to go ahead with the private IP. How to do it with that, we'll see it in the the upcoming slides. But here the method one would be like defining the public IP directly on the controller, and then in this particular case, vSmart and vManage would be defined with the public color, so that the communication would happen with the public color, right? So the detailless tunnels and control connections will get formed between the vBond, vSmart, vManage on the public colors itself, right? And all the communication would go via firewall, where you can also define some rules to restrict only the communication to happen on the UDP or TLS ports, right, as required, right? So this is the simplest way. And then you can let's say if you have only a public transport from the remote side to reach the controllers, then you do not worry about it, because this public IP subnet would then get advertised from firewall to the internet router and then into the public cloud, right? So from the remote site perspective or remote WAN edge perspective, you would still be able to reach to these particular controllers via firewall, right? Because as this public IP subnet is advertised into the cloud, right? So this is how we can, implement by defining public IPs directly on the controller. Okay. Then let's say if we have the hybrid transport, right, and we are defining public IPs directly on the controller. We have MPLS, we have INET as a transport as well, right? So for INET perspective, internet perspective, we should be good because the public IPs are directly advertised into the the internet, right? But in the MPLS as well, if we want that reachability to the controllers, we would still be need to advertise those public IPs into the MPLS domain. Okay, so there are two ways we can do it. Whether we can advertise the specific subnets, right, for the controllers, or we can inject the default route into the MPLS network to route the traffic till the firewall, and firewall would then have the the specific route for the public IPs which are defined on the vManage, vSmart, and vPort, right? So that's how the reachability can be through from the remote side to the controllers. In this particular case, again, we would be defining the public color on the vManage and vSmart, so that I'd be learning, and then the vManage and vSmart would be pointing to the vBond's public IP, and it would be learning the public IPs, right, uh, uh, via the communication which usually happen between the vSmart, vManage, and the vBond, right? So again, from the remote vantage perspective, internet transport, you'd be still having these particular subnets getting advertised into the internet cloud, right? And which would be reachable, so that Vantage would be able to speak to the vBond. Then vBond will give the IPs of vManage and vSmart, right? And for the MPLS as well, the same thing. Let's say even if we don't have the specific route, but if we have default route which can take the traffic at least to the firewall, and firewall have the specific route, or maybe the connected subnets directly to the controllers, the traffic would still go to the and will reach these particular controllers, right? And that's how it will form the control connections, right? So this is the one method, right? But certain customers might ask, okay, not to use the public IPs because of some, the security issue, or maybe their security infosec team doesn't have the framework which allows them to use the public IPs, or define the public IPs directly to the controllers, right? So in that particular case, we can place vBond in, let's say, one zone, and vSmart vManage into the another zone, right, in the DMZ zone, right? And then we can define a private IP directly on the vBond, vSmart, and vManage. Okay. And then any communication happening between the vBond, vSmart, vManage will happen over the public IP. So what we would be doing is that these IPs would get netted on the firewall, okay, and then the traffic will go from one zone to the another zone, okay. So in this particular case, vSmart and vManage will point these to the vBond public IP. Okay, as we all know, we would need to define the vBond IPs or vBond domain name on the vSmart vManage, right? So that we will point to the public IP. So vSmart and vManage will initiate a session with the vBond to, it will try to reach the vBond over the public IP. That's where it will get natted. vBond acts as a stunt server, which usually records the, the both the IPs, right? One with the public, to which it get natted, and then the actual IP which is defined on the controllers, which would be the private. In this particular case, we would need to then define a private color on the vSmart and vManage. So the vBond would be able to identify the private IP and the public IP, right? Because when the remote site, right, remote manage needs to communicate to the vBond, vSmart, vManage, right? Depends on which transport it is connected, whether it is, let's say, private transport, vBond will give the private IP, and if it's the public transport, it will give the public IP of the controllers, right? Yeah. And then let's say if we have both the transport, right, MPLS, you can advertise the private IP directly into the MPLS cloud, right? And then the remote vantage would have the the reachability to the controllers over the private IP. In terms of the internet, the transports, the firewall would be anyways, firewall, and intern, we would also have the internet router, right, which would be advertising natted IP of the vBond, vSmart, vManage into the public cloud. So that's how the reachability from MPLS as well as from the internet cloud can be achieved with this particular the design. Okay. So again the same thing, but here we are placing everything in the one zone. So if you check, in the previous case, we were having two different zones, right? DMZ zone 1, DMZ zone 2, and we place vBond in DMZ 1, and then vSmart we manage in DMZ zone 2. And when the traffic goes, the from one zone to another zone, it will get natted on the firewall. Okay. But here, let's say customer doesn't have the different zones on the firewall. Okay. And we need to deploy these vBond, vSmart, vManage, in one particular zone itself, right? Then this is how we can do it. Again, this NAT, whatever is mentioned in previous as well as this particular design, it is 1:1 static NAT. Okay, we shouldn't be doing PAT and all here. Okay, it is always recommended to have 1:1 NAT, right, for this particular the design, right? So here again we would need to define a private color on vSmart and vManage, and then we would be defining the private IP for vSmart vManage, and then vSmart and vManage will point to vBond to the public IP. So on vSmart and vManage we'll define vBond IP as a public IP, right? So that so that when vSmart vManage try to reach to the vBond, the communication would happen, or it will try to reach over the public IP. So and hence it will get natted on the firewall. Okay. So here the only difference between the previous and this one is that firewall needs to support the hairpinning, NAT hairpinning, right? Because the traffic would go on to the same interface and again come back onto the same interface. Okay, so outgoing and incoming traffic would be on the same interface. So we would need to have firewall to support NAT happening here, right? And the same thing, we can we can then advertise an NAT IP into the um, uh, internet cloud, and as well as long as we have the default route from the MPLS, which is which is at least can put the traffic or send the traffic till the DMZ firewall, and DMZ firewall knows how to reach to the controllers, we should be good. Okay, we can either send a specific route, NATed full, right, public IPs into the MPLS, or we can also have the default route, right? So so this is all about the multiple ways we can achieve the on-prem controller deployment, right? Depends on what sort of the transports we would be using it. If it's only the internet, okay, we can simply define public IP directly on the controllers and advertise it to the internet cloud, so that from the remote vantage perspective, it would be having the reachability to the controllers and would be able to form the control connections, right? But if it's a hybrid transport, we have multiple flavors into it, right? One can have one can have vBond into the one zone, DMZ zone, and vSmart vManage into the another zone, right? Or we can have everything vBond, vSmart vManage, everything behind the DMZ, right? One zone. Or we can have public IP directly getting assigned on the controllers, but in that particular case, we'll have to have at least a default route into the MPLS, which can attract the traffic till the DMZ firewall, or we can advertise a specific subnet into the MPLS domain. It all depends on the mm, uh, what sort of the security guidelines are there defined by the customers, right? Whether they are okay to define public IPs on the controllers, and no matter which solution we put or use it, right? It's always better to define the rules on the DMZ firewall, right? Even if we are defining the public IPs directly on the controller, we should be defining the rules on the firewall to allow only those detailless tailless traffic to pass through uh, via firewall, to have a communication with the remote vantage, no matter whether it is on the MPLS or internet, right? So these are the options to deploy in the on-prem controllers, and then we will now move to the the certificate sessions, right? So in the certificate, we all know the controllers we would be defining, right? So in this particular case, right, it is all zero trust, right? So we manage, we want, we smart, they will mutually authenticate each other, right, within the controllers. And then WAN edge would also, vBond will also validate whether this WAN edge is, belongs to my overlay or not, based on the serial numbers and all. Will go in detail, right? So administrator defined controllers, then single WAN edge list, right, which would be uploaded onto the vManage. If you sync this vManage with the smart account, you did not, define, you did not populate those details, provisioning files and all those things, right? Manually. Okay, automatically vManage will get synced with the PNP, right? And that's how vManage would have the inventory, which are all the manages should be part of this particular overlay, and all, right? So this would be distributed by vManage to all the controllers, right? vManage will, distribute this to all the controllers. Right? So mutual trust, how will it happen to the vBond, right? Let's say we manage vSWAN and we manage to the vBond, right? So certificates are exchanged and mutual authentication takes place, right? How it does that, it validates the root trust and organization name. So every overlay, let's say every customer would have unique organization name, right? And then that would get validated by the vBond, right? Whether these particular WAN edges and the controllers are is having the same org name as supposed to be, right? And then the root trust, right? Root CA, right? Which we usually have it, right? Which we usually install it on all the controllers, right? It should be the same, and the certificate serial number against the authorized WAN edge list, right? So then against which it would be validating, the WAN edge and vSmart and vManage, right? So this is how the authentication would be done in terms of like, this thing, right? Cloud CSR or maybe CSR, virtual CSR and all those things, right? So it would be, looking out for the OTP token and, those things, right? For the authentication and all, right? So vSmart to vSmart, and then we manage to vSmart, right? How the authentication will happen? Then the vSmart will authenticate will trust the other vSmart based on the root CA and all those things, right? And then the certificate serial number and the same thing, organization name, right? We should be unique, defined on all the controllers as well as on the manage, right? And then the vManage will validate the same based on the certificate serial number, root CA, and the organization name, right? Then manage to vSmart and vManage, the same thing basically. So as you would have understood, like, okay, so manage also validates like, the vSmart vManage and vice versa, right? So it is all mutual, right? And it's all zero trust. No one, trust, the other element. Let's say vBond doesn't trust vSmart vManage, vSmart doesn't trust vManage. Okay, so everyone validates whether, I am connecting to the right, the element, right? So the root CA, and then the organization name, and then the certificate serial number. These are the three things which it usually, check for the authentications and all. Then only it, allows that particular WAN edge, to join the fabric, right? So there are different ways of, doing the certification. One is a Cisco PKI certificate. With the Cisco PKI certificate, there are two options, right? One is automated, the another one is manual. And then one can use the enterprise PKI certificate. Maybe some customers, would have some security compliance or some, guidelines defined by the InfoSec team to use their own certificates, right? Enterprise certificates. So in that particular case, we'll have to go ahead with the enterprise PKI certificates, right? How to, install and all those things, how to generate and get it signed and then install onto the controllers and to the WAN edge. We'll, go through it now, okay? So in terms of automated certificate signing through Cisco systems, right? In this particular case, we would need to have the reachability to the cloud SSO Cisco.com, APX Cisco.com. There are certain sites so which it tries to reach to have the to have the reachability to these particular sites. You need to have the access from the managed VPN 0 site, so to the internet, right? So that verification we can do first, right? For that we need to have the DNS server, okay, defined under the VPN 0, right? Then we can check validate with this particular command. After going to the V shell, right? You can check these commands whether and to see if we are getting a proper log, right? Let's say if you are trying call HTTPS cloud SSO cisco.com, the host is live or not. Okay, and the same for the API cisco.com. You can just check, verify whether you have the the reachability to the site, because in turn we manage try to sync with the PNP server, right? Cisco smart account and virtual account, right? Where software.cisco.com, right? It tries to sync with that to fetch all the information directly, okay, without manually uploading provisioning files and all those things, right? As well as the certificates, right? So so you will have to have that reachability for that to happen automatically, right? So which you can verify with this particular method, right? Once you have verified and okay, it is giving the proper result and it has a connectivity to these particular sites, then you can go to the administration setting, right? Into the vManage administration setting. There you will find this box for the smart account credentials, where you can enter these credentials, username and password, and save this. It would be the same credential which you would be using it for the software.cisco.com PNP portal, right? So the same credentials you will have to put and then save here, right? So that it should be able to connect to that particular portal, okay? And then you are in once you're done with that smart credentials, once you enter into it, right? Then the into the vManage, right? Then in the same page administration setting, there is a different section where you would see the controller certificate authorization, and there are different methods you would see, right? Cisco, then manual, Symantec, and enterprise root certificate. You for now, as we are now going ahead with the automated Cisco one, right? You will need to check box the Cisco recommended one, right? And it will try to do the certification automatically, right? Here you will also get the you can also choose like how much validity you want to go ahead with, validity period, right? Whether it is 1 year or 2 year. Usually we go ahead with the 2 years, but it's all up to the customer, right? Whether they want to go ahead with the 1 year or 2 year, right? And then the certificate interval. This is the interval which can be defined by default. It is 60 minutes, but you can always define it lower down to maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes as applicable, right? That interval is basically once the signed certificates are available. Okay, after I mean check whether the signed certificates are available once you submit the CSR, right? So it checks for that at a periodic interval, which is defined by the certificate security interval, right? So ideally we keep it as like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, right? And then you can save this configuration, right? So then after that, you can go to the you can navigate to the the configuration, and then the certificates in that particular thing. You will see vantage list and the controller certificate, right? Controllers. You can click on the controllers, and then you can start generating the CSRs, right? So first we can you can start with the vManage generate a CSR, right? And then close, and then we can repeat the same for the vSmart and vBond. Okay, so here we only have three. You might have the multiple vBond, multiple vSpond based on the high availability and everything, right? Even for that matter, vManage could be in the cluster and all those things. So method is same. We just need to generate a CSR for each of the the controller, okay, which we usually see it in under the controller tab, right? Once it is done, CSR is generated. Okay, then you can log into the software cisco.com PNP certificates. There you would see once the CSR is generated, you would see the status for that particular, the controller in the in progress. And once the certification signing is done, right, you would see that as a completed, right? Uh, and once it is completed, it will automatically get pushed to the vManage, right? Right, and then it will get installed, okay, on all the controller, because as it's the automated and provided you have the, the reachability to uh, uh, the so cloud SSO and APX and all those things, right? So it should get installed automatically, and you would see it into the same field. You need to go to the configurations and then into the certificates, and then you can navigate to the controllers. Here you will see operational status as, the install and all those things, right? So this is how you can do a Cisco automated certification, right? Then let's check how we can do it with the Cisco manual. Let's say you don't have the reachability to the internet and you won't be able to, reach to the, softwarecisco.com PNP portal and all those things for certification to happen automatically, right? In that particular case, you can go for the Cisco manual option as well, right? Uh, the same thing you will have to do in the administration setting again. Okay, controller certificate authorization, click edit, and then manual, right? You will get to see these options, 4 options every time, and then you can see the manual and then save button, right? Once you save this, and then you can generate a CSR again by going into the configuration, then certificates, and then to the controllers, right? Generate a CSR for the vManage, and then the same for the vSmart and vBond, those things, right? So once it is done, CSS are generated, then you can, download this, and, you can then log into the software.cisco.com and all those things, right? With the credential which you would be having it. Just verify that you are into the right, the smart account and virtual account before you generate a certificate, right? Once you verify you are into the right smart account virtual account, then go to the certificates, and then into the generate certificate, you can copy paste that, the CSR here, right? This is how it will show, right? Generate certificate, you can give any name, certificate name we manage, and then certificate signing request CSR here, right? Validity period, you can select again 1 year or 2 year, right? And then you can give some description, certificate for we manage or anything, right, which you want. And then next, right? Once it is done, then it would be in progress, and once the signing is done, it will be like, the completed state, right? And then here you would see in the actions, right, you would see the option to download that, right? So you should be able to download that particular certificate. Once it is downloaded, you can upload it here, right? So again, you need to navigate to the configuration, okay, under the configuration, then certificates to controllers, and then here you would see the option right at the top corner, right? On the right hand side, install certificate, right? There you can select a file, maybe you can copy paste directly, right? From I mean, signed certificate, right? You can copy paste here directly and then install. Once it's installed, then the control connections would get formed between the controllers and all. Okay, so that's how we can do it with the Cisco automated and Cisco manual, right? But as I said, right, few customers might ask us to, do the controller certification with the enterprise root certificate. They might be having their own enterprise root certificate authority, which they would be doing the certification. Not only for this SD-WAN, maybe they would have some other devices, right, for which they would be doing the certification. So they would like to have one, single certificate authority for all the devices, no matter which type it is, right? So in this particular case, how to do it and all, in this particular case, that particular customer would have the own enterprise root certificate authority, right, infrastructure, which we can, use it for doing the certification. Okay. So in this particular, in the previous, the methods, Cisco automated and Cisco manual, right? The root cert chain would be already be there, right? would be, we didn't know, and vManage will push it, automatically to all the managers and all, right? So, but here, as we would have the different root cert, right, root CHIN, right, we'll need to, install it first onto the vManage, so that vManage will push it to the all the, the manage automatically, right? So, we'll see, how to do it and all. So retrieve the root certificate from the your CA server. Okay, so root certificate will have to retrieve it from that particular server which a customer would be having, and then we'll need to upload it to the vManage, right? So here you can see in the administration setting, then click edit controller certificate authorization. Here you will have to select enterprise root certificate, right? In this, as soon as you select that, you would see the certificate section below that, right, where you can upload that particular certificate, right? And then uh, uh, upload and copy paste the certificate, and the save it, right? Then the next thing, click the box to the set, the CSR properties. Here you would have to, mention the domain name and organization unit and all those things, right? Organization. So organization unit it's the same as organization name, right? Which would be depending on the all the, the controllers, as well as on the WAN edges, right? All these things you can, fill these data, right? And then you can select again the validity, right? Whether you want to go ahead with the 1 year or 2 year, right? And then you can save this, right? Once this is done, then you can again navigate to the configurations, and then certificates. Within certificates, to the controllers, and then to generate a CSR, right? So the same thing you will have to do it for the all the available controllers, right? Which you would be able to see it under the controllers tab, right? Uh, right? All the vBond, vSmarts, and vManage, right? Same method, right? Generate a certificate, CSR, and then you will need to submit this particular, the CSR to the certificate authority, right? And then they will give you the signed certificates, right? These signed certificates will then we would need to install it to the respective controllers, right? So again, you will navigate to the configuration and then certificates, and then to the controllers. Then you can click on the install certificates, which would be you would be seeing it at the rightmost top corner, right? And there you can copy paste that particular certificate and then install. Okay, once you install, then all the control connections would be up. Okay, and you should be good with the certificate and the control connections, and then you can start with the manage onboarding, right? So these are the different ways of doing the certifications and all, right? And different the ways to deploy the on-prem controllers. Okay. I guess that's it from this particular session. So if you have any queries, you can post it in the chat, and we should be able to answer your queries.
Hey, hi everyone. Today we'll be covering the how do we install an Cisco SD-WAN image on an iOS XE Cisco router, right? So we would be covering how do we um, install and upgrade an iOS XE device to an Cisco SD-WAN iOS XE image, right? So that's what we're going to cover today. Hi everyone. So let's start from that, and yeah. So on any upgrade, right? So we usually do a backup the configs and stuff. Similar to that, we do recommend to backup the running configs, and on the local boot flash, do we so that we have the local backup of the device, and you can optionally have your running config backed up to any remote device as well, remote TFTP server or some other remote machines as well, right? And in this case, the The basic idea is to back up your running configs to the boot flash with the exact name as original config. So this name has some significance while you have so we will come to know that this was done during the SD-WAN image upgrade. So this name significance has some significance. So keep it the same way, that would work. And the second thing is to copy the iOS SD-WAN image to the boot flash. So you can either copy that to the existing iOS router, basically. So you can copy the SD-WAN image to the boot flash via FTP or DFTP, or you can use the USB copy also, whichever is feasible. Right. Once the file is copied, then we can move on with the. So there's basically there's one more requirement which are there for the previous image versions. If you are in older images, then there might be a requirement for your Raman upgrade as well. So similar to the iOS image which we copied, we would need to copy the Raman image as well. And the compatibility requirements for the Raman and the iOS versions are you can get those from the Cisco release notes. You can get that version numbers matching all those stuff. So basically, those are clearly documented in the release notes. So before going for an upgrade, do verify the hardware versions and the software compatibility metrics with the Raman. You can get these from the release notes of the versions which you're going to upgrade. Okay. Similar to the iOS XE image, you can copy the Raman image as well, similar to the boot flash, right? Via FTP or TFTP or USB, whichever is feasible. So once you do the upgrade meaning once you have copied the Raman image, you'll have to do an upgrade. So basically, for this, you'll have to do an upgrade. The command for running that is like upgrade ram-monitor, file name, boot flash, and the file name. And you'll have to also mention the RP as well. So in this case, it's an ISA 4K. Where do we mention is like R0 is the process 0. So you'll have the R0 at the end. So basically, or you can say all also. So basically, once this is done, your firmware will be upgraded. But that will not get or like it would not be persistent. So we will have to reload it so that the new version will take effect on the device firmware. So once the router reboots and comes up back, so the firmware will be upgraded so that it will be sufficient for the prerequisites of your new SD-WAN image can be installed on top of it. So that and you can also do show RAM on basically show RAM-1. So the spelling is wrong actually. So it should be show RAM monitor. Once you do that, R0, you'll be able to see the version which is currently active. So you'll be able to verify that as well. Then here you can also run. Then we have to once the router reboots and comes back up, we'll have to change your boot variables here. In this case, you might have previous images and previous boot variables which you had for your iOS XE device. The previous boot markers would be all pointing towards your iOS image versions, right? So you'll have to remove all of them and make sure every line under the boot marker are removed. Make sure everything is removed. Once that is removed, verify that and then add the new image pointing to the SD-WAN image. Right. So make sure everything is removed. Then you can change it to make sure your new SD-WAN image is pointing to the boot marker. Once that is done, you can actually change the config register also. Change the config register to 0x2102. So that will be the normal, or in general, that will be the reload sequence or the boot config register value for the normal reboot, right? So it will be the same. So make sure you have your console does not go onto Ramon or something else. So make sure this comes up in the normal router boot sequence so that you have your configuration also set. Once that is done, you'll have to save the configurations. We do right mem, so save the configurations of the boot variables. Verify that with show bootware command. Make sure you have your right boot marker pointing to the new SD-WAN image. Then also your configuration value to 2102 also. Right? Once this is done, you can go ahead with the reload. So so I forgot. Yeah. So then once this is all done, you'll have to do a write erase. So basically this write erase will actually remove all your existing iOS configurations from your startup config. So once this write erase is done, verify that startup config, no config is present in your startup config. So basically your NVRAM file should be empty. Once you do verify that, you can do a reload. And once the reload is complete, the router boots up and comes up. So it'll be a fresh router, right? So it will ask for your initial configuration dialog. You can say no, and auto install also you can terminate that. Once that is done, it will prompt you for a username password. So you can use admin. That would be a one-time password on the SD-WAN routers. So this admin is only one-time password for your fresh login on the router which it got booted up and comes up. So basically what happens here is it's a one-time password which you get admin, username is admin, that will be same, but the password admin is only one time. If you log out or it times out after some time, then it won't allow you to log into the router. So you will have to you'll have to reboot, break sequence, get into the break sequence, change the boot markers and all the stuff again, and do fresh restart. That's when you'll end up in trouble. Maybe you'll have to go for TAC as well in case you need to. Right? If you don't know the actual method of breaking it, you might have to go to TAC, which will delay things. So make sure as soon as you do enter admin in the same session, you do configure the you should configure the username password as you wish. You can change it. Admin name will be the same, but admin will be the same, but make sure you have your passwords configured as well for the admin. And if you want, you can add some other username password also. But once you do that and save the config, commit the config, that is one of the major step or like important step which I would say many people forget. Okay. So it would also ask for in the previous step you might see it might directly ask you to confirm, you set a new password and confirm password. 1 second. Yeah. So here it might ask you sometimes you'll be able to see it would ask as soon as you say enter admin as the one-time password, then it would ask you to do a confirm new password and confirm new password. If that is most of the cases it would happen. If you're following the same process and steps, you would be able to see that a new password and the confirm password would be prompted and you can set that, right? And if in case people forget to do it or press enter multiple times, then on the console screen due to multiple messages on the screen, people miss it. If they miss it, then you'll have to, once you go after PNP process is stopped in the next sequence, you'll have to do that in the next step actually. So once you do that, go into the config mode, config terminal mode, and then do set the username password as well. Right? Yeah. So in this step actually, so if you are going for I would say manual method of manual bootstrap or manual method or bootstrap method, then you will have to stop the PNPA process, right? So PNP is usually used in case of ZTP or like zero text provisioning methods. In that case, you should not stop it. If you're not going for that, even if you're going for that, I would say you can stop this. Only thing is you're going to get the IPs and stuff, but you'll have to do a reset as well. So initially, while you do the upgrade, I would say you can still stop this, right? So we'll have in the next few steps, we'll have to do another software reset. So basically, to in this step, I would say still you can stop the PNPA discovery stop. So this is one of the mandatory step. If until PNP process is stopped, you will not be able to do any process or like anything. You will not be able to execute any of your commands on this. So it's good. You will need to stop the PNP process running, right? And then so once that is done, you will be able to get the router prompts will be there, and so you can run the request platform software SD-WAN software upgrade confirm. This you'll have to do so that from the user side you are confirming the software which is installed, so that it becomes like a persistent image, and the image will be on the SD-WAN image will be confirmed by the user, and the installation will say it is complete. You'll see these log messages. The commit has been completed from the installation of the packages as well. And you can verify that with show SD-WAN software. Here you will see in the table, it will be the active software because it will be the only software. So, and the default and previous everything would be true. But confirmed section, you will have to see, make sure that it is confirmed from the user, right? If you don't see user or any other value you see here, make sure you run this command again and it says confirmed. So that the committed software is in the installed software is committed, and after the reboot and stuff, you will see the software is back, or any reboot happens, the software would be will install back. I mean, it will boot up with the same installed image. Okay, and so you'll have to do this step as well. Most of the time we do forget this, but this is one of the important step. So here you will have to do a reset the software, the SD-WAN software which we have installed now, which will be an important step. So we'll have to do request platform software SD-WAN software reset. So basically this would trigger a reboot of the router. Okay. What happens here is basically the IOs to SD-WAN image conversion. During that time, there are a lot of internal variables, initializations would have happened from iOS image to an SD-WAN image, right? All those the parameters and the variables which have been used will be reset, and basically we need a clean software image in purely in SD-WAN image. For that purpose, we'll have to do a software reset, right? So this is one of the important steps. Do not forget to do this. But for this, you will need a reload. While you do this, the software, the variables and everything will be reset, and then it will come with a clean, fresh SD-WAN image. So the router will reboot, and you can after the router reboots, it comes up with a new SD-WAN software image, and you will be able to verify that with show SD-WAN software again. Once you have verified that, you will be able to basically pretty much that's it. The software will be running on the new SD-WAN image. So you should be up and running with this Cisco SD-WAN image. That's it from my side on the software image installation with the iOS SD-WAN to iOS to SD-WAN image migration part. Hey, Rajiv.
Yeah, thank you, Ram. I'll just stop the recording now.